then began migrating outwards 130,000 years ago. The federal government has released concept artwork for the new Western Sydney Airport terminal, but residents will have to wait to see draft flight paths. While work is charging ahead at the site, the flight paths are not expected to be made public until at least 2021. Blue Mountains Mayor Mark Greenhill joins us now. Mark Greenhill, welcome. So these concept plans are pretty schmick, but how do you feel about the release of these now?
Well, I'm concerned about the flight paths that seem to be in witness protection. They were released a few years ago to a hue and cry, great backlash, and disappeared and haven't been seen since. But rumours of their existence abound. It's kind of like an episode of Utopia. We have the airport with no flight paths. It's the Westminster episode, the hospital with no patients. It'd be funny if it wasn't so disrespectful. At the end of the day, the community I represent is going to be impacted 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and they want to know where the planes will be.
So what have you previously been told about these flight paths?
Previously, we were shown flight paths a few years ago that had a merge point over the Blue Mountains town of Blaxland. So just a few thousand feet up.
Well, what is a merge point?
It's where all of the flight paths come into one point and then head down the hill towards the airport. Now, the government said that that was withdrawn. There'd been no merge point over Blaxland, but we haven't seen the flight paths since. So while I accept that there may not be any merge point over Blaxland, it's hard to see with the airspace architecture for Richmond and Bankstown and Kingsford Smith how the planes won't be funnelled over the Blue Mountains. We just want to know.
Yeah, isn't it pretty obvious from where the airport is what the flight paths are going to be?
Yeah, you have to look where the airport is, but also where other airports are and where their aeroplanes fly. So their airspace architecture and the spaces in between are obviously the areas where the new airport's planes will fly.
So what do you think about this process so far?
Well, I think it's farcical and I think it's disrespectful. We have the Visitor Information Centre on a construction site. That's where you'd want to go if you're visiting Sydney. We have now the schmick designs for terminal, but we don't have the one thing the community wants to know, and that's the flight paths. You know, back in the early 2000s, I was involved in the campaign then, and the airport wasn't proceeded with. And one of the reasons was that the community rose up when they saw those flight paths. I can't help thinking it's a little bit advantageous to the government that the flight paths won't be released until it's almost all too late, and that's my concern.
So for people who aren't familiar with the Blue Mountains and Sydney, give people an idea of what the Blue Mountains is, why people are attracted to live there, and why you're concerned about what could happen.
So the Blue Mountains is a World Heritage Area. It was listed as a World Heritage Area back in 2000 by UNESCO. It has 5 million tourists come and visit it each year. It's the home of many rare and endangered species. It's a wonderland to visit. The environment there is very fragile. The visitors come for the peace and the tranquility, and the concern we've got is that there's an economic impact from losing that peace and tranquility, that thing that attracts people to the Blue Mountains, but we're also concerned about the impact on our residents and the impact on our natural environment. Our residents sit more than 1,000 metres, 1,000 feet, I should say, above sea level, so any planes that come in will impact us greater because we're higher.
The government, I guess, would argue that there is a positive economic impact with the business that this airport, this significant airport, is going to bring into the region.
Yeah, Personally, I think that the evidence of that has fluctuated. We've been told different stories about how many jobs will be created and where they'll come from. There's no guarantee those jobs will come from Western Sydney. But at the end of the day, what the community of the Blue Mountains wants to know is how will they be impacted? Similarly, communities in Western Sydney, no one knows where the planes will fly. No one knows how low, how often, and how much their quality of life will be diminished. That's just unknown.
Yeah. And so do you really think that you're going to be able to stop planes flying over the Blue Mountains? Like, this airport is going ahead, like the building started. It's close to the Blue Mountains. Do you really think that with some community enthusiasm that you will be able to prevent planes flying over the Blue Mountains at a level which is disruptive?
Well, I wonder if the government thinks that, and I wonder if that's why we haven't seen the flight paths. I remember what happened in the year 2000 and beyond. I was president of the Regional Organisation of Councils back then. It was community action that stopped it then. But even if you're of the view that that that's not going to happen, that they're racing ahead so quickly they're going to build this, at least people should know where the planes are going to fly so that they can have a say, so they can speak out. I'm against the airport. I don't think it should be there. But I'm really offended when the community I represent is being given shiny terminals and visitor information centres, everything but what they really want to know, and that is, how much will my quality of life be diminished?
Do you expect those flight paths have been settled on now and the government's just not releasing them?
Look, I don't believe people are being dishonest. What I believe is that the government could settle flight paths and could release them because they did a few years ago. It's inexplicable that they could do it in 2015 but they can't do it in 2019. I think it should be an emphasis for the government. They've given us a timetable. They've said 2021. Make it sooner. If they knew what the flight paths were in 2015, they can generate flight paths now. They know where Kingsford Smith's planes fly. They know where Bankstown's planes fly. They know where the Richmond RAF fly. They know the spaces in between. This is not hard.
And Mark Greenhill, just while we've got you here, the Blue Mountains was ravaged by bushfires 10 years or so. How many years ago?
2013.
Yeah. Terrible bushfires up there through that year, that period. Yeah. We're coming into a really dry summer now. What are conditions like there up in the Blue Mountains, and how are people up there feeling about the prospects for the season ahead?
Yeah, I was mayor at the time, and it was a period that I'll never forget. A lot of people were deeply impacted by that and are still recovering. The bush is very dry. The conditions are not good. We are on high alert. What I say to Blue Mountains residents wherever I go is have a bushfire safety plan ready. Know what you're going to do when and if this happens so that you can put that plan in action immediately and not be caught short. That's the big message. It's a scary prospect this summer. I hope we don't see it ever again, but the community needs to make sure it's ready.
I think there was something like 200 homes that were lost up that way in 2013. Have most of those people rebuilt, or what's the progress there?
A large number of people never came back, and a large number did. I spoke to a resident just the other day who said, I'm back on my block, I'm in a home, but it's not my home, it's not the home I had. So I'm in my block, I'm on my property in a different house, and there's a sense of dislocation around that. Everyone's recovery is different. Some people have resettled well, others have resettled well but will never forget the terror of that day, and some have never come back. It's got to be seen to be believed, and we look at the terrible events elsewhere in the state and then we think about the Blue Mountains, 200 houses in an afternoon. It was an incredible thing, and it'll be a time in my mayoralty I will never forget. Yeah,
and well, good luck with the season ahead. Hopefully there are no terrible blazes up there this year. Mark Greenhill, thanks so much for coming and chat to us.
Thank you.
Now, 40 elderly residents are searching for a new home as the